You have to swim to Taipei, and the Taiwanese have been preparing for 45. Also, the U.S. is a naval power, and Taiwan's an island. So assumption 1, gone. Assumption 2, Russian weapons are pretty good, so let's steal all their IP and clone them for our entire military. They're now having $2 trillion of buyer's remorse. Assumption number 3, Russia's way too important to the world, so no one is going to sanction them if the war happens. Well, crap. And say what you will about the Russian economy, it is wildly inefficient, but it is the world's largest producer and exporter of energy and food products. It's like, China is the world's largest importer of both. You take the sanctions that are on Moscow and you put them on Beijing, you get a deindustrialization collapse complete with a famine that kills 500 million people in less than 18 months. I mean, there's no math here. But I think the thing that has really terrified the most is the boycotts. It's one thing when Brussels or Washington or Tokyo says that you can't do this, you can't do that. But when Halliburton emerges as the voice of morality, holy crap. The Chinese economic model is based on access to foreign markets and foreign technology. You remove that, there is nothing left. And so every assumption that they have made for 40 years has been proved wrong in the last 8 months. Now, normally, this is where the chairman would take all his smart people and put them in the back room with some beer and pizza and say, don't come out until I have a plan B. But as part of his purges, he has killed all those people. So there's no capacity left in the Chinese system to adapt to change, or in circumstance or otherwise. And so the only reason I can see that Xi might give the order and attempt a war anyway, even almost certainly knowing he would lose and it would be the end of China as a strategic power, like in a matter of days, because this is a naval fight. The only reason I can see is that if you have already lost all faith in your economic expansion, and you know that the lie that you've been feeding your people for the last several years is just that, there is something to be said for choosing the time and the place of a patriotic conflict so that you can write the narrative. That's the only reason, though. And that means, you're talking about that 500 million dead Chinese from famine. If that might be a price they are willing to pay in order to retain power. But that is not a China that matters to the world.
I mean, they've done this before, right? They've had in history.
Multiple collapses. Yes.
Reckless policies.
Oh, God, yeah. There's dozens of examples of how China can go to hell very quickly. And it does usually end with civilizational collapse.
So the dependency we have in the West on China, what does this mean for, if they're not going to attack Taiwan, but they're becoming very insular, what does that mean for us?
Well, there's 2 areas where the United States in specific has a degree of dependency. One is materials processing, primarily in metals, but not exclusively. And then second, of course, is manufacturing, most notably in electronics. I don't mean to belittle those. If we're going to attempt the green revolution at all, we need the lithium. If we want to do any sort of large-scale construction, we need the steel, we need the aluminum, and everything else. The advantage we have in the materials processing is most is based on technologies from the 1910s and 1920s. It's not hard. It's not really expensive. It does take time to build it out. And so the faster the Chinese break happens, the more of an adjustment period we're going to have. But I would argue that we are going to get there anyway. And so I would rather see us starting sooner rather than later. As for electronics manufacturing, there's this weird disconnect between fact and reality in the United States on what the reality of Chinese manufacturing is. I think the best way to explain it is to look at their semiconductor industry, because everything is kind of a derivative of that these days. So the high-end chips that you put into computers or cell phones, they don't make any of those. They import 100% of them. Those come from Taiwan, Korea, the United States, and Japan. The mid-grade chips that go into cars and freight services and power management system and aerospace, they don't make any of those either. They import 100% of those. Those come from Malaysia and Thailand. The low end, your singing dryer, the chip in your watch that beeps when you're whisking things just right, your margarita machine, Internet of Things, that's China's stuff. That's all China. But they don't make any of the machinery that's necessary to make it. That's all imported. as are the tools that operate those machines, as is the software that those machines run on, as is the staff that manage those facilities. And, say what you will about Joe Biden. 2 weeks ago, he basically killed the Chinese tech industry because he said you can't import the high end or the medium end or the equipment, the tools, the software, make the low end. And by the way, if you're an American working in that sector, you have to choose between your citizenship and your job. And within 24 hours, every American citizen in the industry was either transferred abroad or quit. It's over. We're just now waiting for the Chinese to decide how they want to die, because all they can do now is assembly, and assembly is not hard. And since their population bomb is so far advanced, they're not even the low-cost location for that anymore. They're not competitive in any manufacturing sector anymore before the tech kill. So we need to rapidly come to the conclusion in this country that we need to double the size of the industrial plant. The sooner we do that, the better off we'll be. That's a wildly different freight system, because we're talking about the end of transoceanic shipping, either because of security or because the Chinese and another topic, the Germans, are vanishing from the face of the earth. And our choice is to do it within North America or not have the stuff. I would rather have the stuff.
So what does this mean? So we're shifting away from Asia. You mentioned Europe having its own set of challenges. Does the world once again become America's? Does the center of the economic power shift back to North America?
You could argue that it never really left, but I think what we're looking at is a lot more structural. Part of globalization was we pay the defense costs that allow your economies to advance for the first time in your history in many cases. And that's been 75 years. That's the world we all know. And specifically, we've all become used to the last 35 years, where the Chinese entered the system with 1 billion workers, pushing down the cost of manufactured goods. And the collapse of the Soviet system dumped an empire of raw materials on the system at the same time. And so that 30-year period since 1990, when we've had cheaper and cheaper and cheaper manufactured goods and low inflation in commodity prices, this is like the sum total of most of our business experience. This is the most atypical period in human history. It was always going to last for a historical moment, and the historical moment is now ending. We now have to do something a little bit more normal. And in a world where you're going to get a little bit more normal, the two factors you need to look at are demographics and geography. Actually, can we bring up the map? That's a good spot. Yeah. What you're looking at here is just a map of the waterways and the farmlands of the United States. Those blue lines, the greater Mississippi, the intracoastal, all the attached rivers, that is more miles of navigable waterway than the rest of the planet combined. It's about 20,000 miles. I'm sorry, about 13,000 miles. We have the lowest cost for internal transport on the planet. And it should be lower because of the Jones Act. We basically told all foreigners that they couldn't participate in our water transport. You guys, I think, can imagine what would happen to trucking and trains and aerospace if we did that. Oh my God, what a shit show that would be. But we've done it for water. So we've taken our single biggest geographic advantage, and now water transport's only like single digits of our total transport. If we just brought that back.